so much. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you decided to spend your evening with us. My name is Lonnie. I am a partner here at Salesforce Ventures, where I lead design for the firm. To say that I'm excited about tonight would be a gross understatement. This is an overwhelmingly positive response, and we are so happy to have you here. Our June pop-up event, Tech's Future is Female, features industry veterans who are forging a path towards a more inclusive and diverse tech ecosystem. We're joined by Sharon Vosmek, CEO of Astia Ventures, Meredith Finn, Director at Salesforce Ventures, Jennifer Billock, VP of Product at Ozlo, and Janice Roberts, Partner at BGV. I'm gonna go with BGV. Oh, this is a new announcement. I don't know if you... Tonight they're going to discuss biases in the workplace, accessing capital, the importance of networks, and the role of mentors. Before we get started, I just want to take a moment to thank tonight's sponsor, Shepherd Mullen. When we approached them with the idea of tonight, our goals and our ideas could have not been more aligned, so we are so thankful to have you as a partner. At Salesforce Ventures, we are so excited to be a part of this dialogue, because to us, this is more than just throwing an event. We're actually putting our money where our mouth is. Over the years, we've had the opportunity to not only invest in incredible female founders, but we have been able to work with women at all levels who inspire us. Tonight, we're going to tackle some of the challenges that women face, one being accessing capital. And I'm proud to announce that our seed fund has over 35% female founder women. We're also in the process of raising our second fund, which we're going to be including a Rooney Rule as part of our diligence mandate. As part of that, we're also going to be asking some of the, actually all of the startups that we're investing in to implement those same processes. We know there's more work to be done, and that's why we're excited about events like tonight. But when I was speaking with Bill and Brian about the concept of this event, one thing was clear. We can't do this alone, and men play an important role in this too. So we'll be discussing that later. But more importantly, as investors and entrepreneurs, we have a great responsibility to build the tech ecosystem that we want. One that's diverse, one that's inclusive, one that's going to change. So we are so excited to have our spotlight guests here tonight. Thank you so much. And we are very excited. These women will not only challenge you to take a seat at the table, but be a catalyst to sway the future. So with that, Bill, Brian, I'll let you take over.
We're glad you guys are here. And our hope is that by the time you leave our offices tonight, hopefully you have a few pearls of wisdom that you didn't have before. But also, hopefully, you might have a pathway to get something that you need, be it capital, strategic partnerships, et cetera. Part of the reason we handpicked these amazing women to be our panelists tonight is they actually have a mission, and you're going to hear from each of them in a minute, really dedicated to helping you, female entrepreneurs, succeed. And maybe real quick, we'll just go down the line. Sharon, if you could just talk a minute on Astia's mission and how these amazing entrepreneurs in the room can leverage your operation.
Someone give me a mic.
Can you hear me without the mic?
No. Yeah? Gotta use it? Gotta use it. Okay. Well, where we have to start is actually with a round of applause, because 30% in the portfolio, 35% is well above any of the highest percentages that I've ever been able to track, which is 25% is the highest I've been able to track in a male firm. So, gentlemen, applause. The average is somewhere between 4 and 6% within the portfolio. So well done, gentlemen. Astia is a global organization committed to the success and funding of high-growth companies that include women. We've been around since 1998 doing this work. We, over the years, evolved our model because we went from 2% in 1998 of venture capital being invested in women-founded teams to this year 4% of women-founded teams securing venture capital. Ridiculous. And so we launched our own investment activity in 2013. We just had our first exit, Seal Medical. Very excited about that. It was acquired last week. And what we know about the companies we invest in and that we work with is that they're not only exceptional because they have women, they are exceptional because they outperform in the market. Women-led, women co-founded companies, along with their male colleagues, out-return investment capital to their investors by 63%. 63%. This is no small thing. I'm an economist. I care about numbers. That's huge. And what I want, I guess, this crowd to walk away with is an understanding that that's a value add. You're not here for support. You're not here for comfort. You're here because you win. And I want you to walk away knowing that you do and with some really clear steps that you can take to really own that space.
That's great. Meredith, who joins us from Salesforce Ventures, it was interesting. There was I'm not going to say an edict, but a terrific mandate that Mark Benioff made for your mission around female entrepreneurs. Can you tell us about that?
Over the last couple of years, about not only creating an environment of equality in terms of numbers within the company, but also really helping to drive initiatives both within Salesforce and on the national stage in terms of pursuing equal pay for women. From an investment perspective, the Salesforce Ventures team has really sort of taken a look at our investment activity, how we, sort of approach the market, and decided that, we actually need to start to live some of these values that Mark is talking about in terms of, employment and makeup of the workforce within tech, in terms of adopting that and bringing those numbers into our portfolio. And so, sort of similar to, what Sway is doing around, a Rooney Rule, like initiative, we are also, really looking to target and go after female entrepreneurs. And we continue to launch a new fund. It feels like every couple of weeks we just launched another one. Yeah. So we have capital to deploy. And one of the initiatives that we're pursuing, in particular with my colleague Claudine, who's also joined me in the audience, is really making sure that we're investing in some of the best women as well.
So, thank you. Hey, Jen, you've spent your career in product management building really cool stuff. So maybe talk to us a little bit about your career and what you're doing now.
Sure. Excuse me. So right now I run product at a company called Ozlo, and we are an artificial intelligence powered search engine, essentially. And I tend to go back and forth between deep technology startups and sort of consumer focused fun startups. And what I really appreciate about what I'm doing right now is the degree to which I'm seeing speed and acceleration and the kinds of things that are a bit futuristic and almost like foreshadowing from the point of view of what the next 10 to 20 years I think will look like for the generations that come behind me. So I also, first and foremost, before I'm anything like a product manager or a, CEO sometimes or COO sometimes, I am a mother. And I am the mother of a girl who's 11 who loves to code and loves math and can't spell, which drives me crazy, but who asked me one day in the car when we were driving to school if it was illegal for women to make as much as men, because she knew that it was not required that they be paid equally. So I love having conversations with her and her friends about such matters. And I've enjoyed forging a path through technology. I often find myself being the only woman in the room, and I like to bring other women into the room.
Yay. Well, maybe we can jump into some interesting issues, and Janice, I'll give this first one to you to comment on. But there's a lot of debate and research and I know Sharon and I have had this conversation about inclusion versus exclusion, and how do we get women in tech more engaged and better access? And there's a couple of schools of thought. One is, hey, we need to do more stuff that's women only or women focused. There's another school of thought that says that's to the detriment of women in technology because it's excluding you from the networks that really matter, networks to capital, networks to talent, et cetera. There was an article this morning, some of you may have seen, pretty fascinating. Harvard Business School did a study of a bunch of top-tier venture capital firms, and they correlated the data of their track record over 20 years to the preponderance of having daughters, kind of going back to Jen's theme here. And statistics show that firms that have GPs with daughters perform significantly higher than firms that don't. And the data is inarguable. The question is why. So Janas is now with...
For the record.
Yeah. So Janas, before she was at Benamou Global Ventures, which is an outstanding firm that we at Sway Ventures partner with, was a managing director at a tier 1 fund many of you are probably familiar with called the Mayfield Fund. Can you talk a little bit, Janas, in your experience as a VC over the past 15 to 20 years, like how do you think about this issue of inclusion versus exclusion? What's your philosophy on that?
Well, so first of all, I believe generally in inclusion, and I think that the conversations move from women and women only to various different, I don't want to call women minorities, I think that's a stupid phrase for women actually, but different groups of people that find it hard to be included, whether they come from different places, different races, or neurodiversity, which is an interesting sort of thing now in the tech world. But I definitely am someone who believes in inclusion. A few things I would comment on, and it sort of indirectly refers to that article. So I've been in the Valley now for over 25 years. I came here from the UK. I sold a company to...
She was 7 years old when she got here.
Yeah, I came with 7 years old. I sold a company to 3Com Corporation, which is how I come here. So I've seen it sort of Europe, here, operating world, venture world. I'm on public boards. And so, there's certain things I've seen change and certain things not. Venture, I think, has changed not so much. If you look at the number of female partners, and I think there is a reason for that, and I'm hopeful for change. And I think the partners and daughters and men and daughters thing is helping. So it's interesting, you do see a change. Many of the people that I've worked with over the years now do have daughters, and their daughters are like Jen's daughter, they're challenging. I have a daughter, she has no comprehension that in fact someone would pay her any less because she's a woman. In fact, she says to me, she's got one more year at university, and she said, I'm going to ask what they're paying the men. If they're paying me anything different, I'm not taking that job. And I'm thinking, whoa. But it's just, I think young people today have a different set of expectations. But I am seeing that men who are sort of getting older, have daughters, and having dialogue with their daughters is starting to think, okay, I need to think a little differently about women and the value that they add, and maybe need to adapt a little bit. And in venture, I think the biggest challenge for women is that, and I have to be careful because I'm a Brit, and British people are a bit focused on teams, above all everything else. But, I think that, I think Mary Meeker, and she's great, she's at Kleiner Perkins, obviously she's a luminary in the industry. She said venture's not really a team sport. And I think women like to collaborate and work together. And I think that people now are seeing that you get real benefits from working together. And I said this to my partners at BGV. Only yesterday we had an offsite. I said that we make better decisions when we're together. It's not just about women being in the room or not. It's all of us together. It's sort of really having a debate and using the best of what we bring. Some are more technical than others. And I think that's the same with women. I think if you have conversations with women in the room, they tend to be different. And they can often be more thoughtful. They can come to an outcome. It's not just about, a competitive situation. And, I think things are changing. And what I don't like, and I have to say this, Brian, which sort of reflects to what you're saying is, You don't want to come to the party just as a woman. I'm a woman, you should include me. And I don't think anybody here would do that. I've talked to a few of you here, and everybody is great at something. And that's what you come into the room with. You come into the room with your skills. People ask me, as a woman, what's important? I say, be good at something. And then you come into the room and you are what you are good at. You are what you know. You are what your experience is. Whether it's analytics, computing, product management. There are very few product managers, by the way, around that are any good at all. So this is great. But you come in, and when you have something to say, when you are good at something, then I think the tone of the situation changes. So there's a lot more to talk about, and I don't want to take over this particular section, but I have seen progress, and maybe we can get to that. But it's still difficult in venture, but it's changing. I would say one thing. In addition to BGV and Mayfield, I'm also an advisor to a firm called Illuminate, which was formed by a woman called Cindy Padnos. And her goal was to, it's really about diversity. And if you look at her fund, it's not just about women, but in particular with respect to women, she has many CEOs and founders who are female. And the fact that she has said, please come and pitch your deal to me has meant that she's had more deal flow and she's essentially got more deals. At BGV, we're just a small fund. 3 of our CEOs are women. And I don't think my partners think about someone being a woman or not, but they're great at what they do. Sorry, that was long-winded, but we can get to some of these other things.
Yeah, no, very, very helpful. I think this is a general question for the panel, but Sharon, I'll direct it at you first. We were having a conversation before the panel, and I think part of what the audience is looking for, we've got entrepreneurs, we've got venture capitalists. What can people do inside of their own firms to try to have something that is inclusive, that gets us to break that statistical difference that we've seen historically? And I'll give you one stat, knowing that you're an economist by training. It's amazing to me, I was doing research for this, I didn't realize that in the 80s, computer scientists, can anyone guess what percentage in the 80s were female? How much? Yeah, so 30, 35. Today it's half that. I mean, it's just staggering. So it's a part of what's driving the question, but I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, this is an interesting question. So there's a great deal of research in a lot of the economy, but one of the spaces that's most difficult to research is venture. So I'm going to do some extrapolating. You're going to tolerate me and forgive me, and I'm going to hopefully ground it in enough of experience that you're going to take my word for it. We don't have a whole lot of causational data, but what we know is correlational, which matters. And the reason it matters is we're dealing with social sciences on this anyway, so trust me. Venture firms can do one thing to ensure that they will have a woman in the portfolio, and that is have a woman on the team. And it is the one and only thing that achieves the result. So honestly, if you're an entrepreneur in the room, there's nothing you can do. Having said that, if you're a VC in the room, there's something you can do. And that's having a woman not in the room in a passive role, in the room as your perfect peer. And what that means is part of the investment decision. There is a GP. It doesn't help women to have us there in a lower role. It helps to have us there in a peer role where we can contribute as your peers. Entrepreneurs, what you can do, man or woman, if you seek inclusion, I think Mark Benioff actually articulated it really well. You can't do it later. You have to do it at the beginning, because later it only gets harder. Astia, we're a global community. Today we're 5,000 strong. Our angel network is 50 strong. Each of those bodies, half men, half women. Small, you can say, okay, 50, I get how you got half and half, but the 5,000, also half and half. But where it started was when our founders started the organization. The premise was inclusion. And so we, at the board level, half men, half women. At the executive team level, half men, half women. Within the community, as it built from 5 to 10 to 20 to 5,000, half men and half women. But you can't achieve it later. It really must be baked in, and baked in often. I loved the research around daughters because I've always suspected it, so it was nice. The other one that I suspect will emerge is wives who are working. If you find GPs, and Janice, I'd love your commentary on this, in the Valley, if you find a male GP who has a female wife who's working, you will have a different conversation than a female wife who's not. And it is across the economy. That's not unique to venture. That happens in board dynamics. It happens in executive suites. There's a dynamic when husband and wives are seen as equals within the marriage from an economics perspective. And I'm not saying they're not equals and emotional and as partners in other ways, but I mean they're contributing more on an equal level. You see a different manifestation in the economy for how those men interact with women and do business with women.
I just add to that quickly?
Please.
Sharon, I think you hit on some really important points there, which, I think I can certainly, reflecting on my experience at Salesforce Ventures, attest are true. One of the reasons we are now looking at investing in more women is because I drove that initiative. But what made me comfortable driving that initiative, there was a very clear message from our CEO at the top that this was important. That gave me the latitude to then go to the powers that be within Salesforce and say, this is important to me. It also gave other women within Salesforce the power to then sort of pick up this initiative and help support us as well. So I think it's both having women on the team, but also, very importantly as well, that messaging from the top. So, if you're a CEO starting a company now, the best way to help promote diversity in tech, going forward and be a part of that trend is, to really create that foundation of equality, as you're starting your company. Because that's the only way that I think we ultimately do achieve equality in tech, is that there's alignment and leadership at the top, and this becomes a critical priority for all of these organizations.
So a question, I'd love to get each of your perspective, just a quick kind of soundbite answer. If you're male or female, transgender, regardless of what your background is, if you can't raise capital, you can't succeed, right? There's no foundation for your business. So from each of your perspectives, what's something that you would advise our amazing women entrepreneurs here tonight? What's the one thing you would recommend to them to be successful raising capital? And maybe Meredith, we'll start with you.
Put me in the hot seat. Listen, it is difficult out there. I think you're fighting a couple of things. One, what's called pattern recognition within venture capital, right? Where a lot of VCs say, it doesn't fit my pattern, right? Or it's not my standard founder, or who the type of person I invest in, or the type of company I invest in. If it's a femtech company, it's really hard to find someone who's sort of fits into that pattern. So I think it's knowing who, sort of knowing your audience, right? Going into the conversation very educated about who you're speaking with. What companies have they invested in before? Are they interested in investing in female entrepreneurs or in companies within your sector? I think it's also important, and I think we talked about this before, not to just sort of cold email people, but rather really leverage the power of your network. And I find this is typically where the female entrepreneurs I do meet with are a little bit light on, the network that gets them connected into these VCs. And so part of the work that you need to be doing as, in terms of building your company is also building that network of fellow entrepreneurs, of venture capitalists, because walking into a meeting or, getting it with a warm introduction is incredibly different than, sending a pitch deck over with a cold email to, the Salesforce Ventures at Salesforce email account, which we sort of go through once a week and clear out. And I think it really comes down to networking in a lot of ways. It is an old school industry still in that who is important. But you do have the ability to sort of connect very deeply with people. And I think target the women that are very actively seeking to invest in other women and underrepresented minorities as well.
Yeah, so I have some actually just very practical advice from the other side. One of my very first pitches, I was really nervous and I wasn't super excited about what I was doing, and it didn't go that well. And a man came up to me who I had been pitching afterwards, and he said, "Take your necklace off and bounce less." And another woman recently said to me, she said, one of my favorite mentors, the best thing she ever told me, don't wear earrings. So I think it's actually really important to know that you are up against substantial gender bias. So pay attention to what you're wearing. Pay attention to keeping your feet on the ground. Pay attention to the inflection in your voice. Over-prepare. You have to over-prepare as a woman. You have to be like 10 times as prepared. And yes, you do have to find mentors and you do need warm intros just like everybody else that will help. But I think it's really important to just acknowledge we all have implicit gender bias. I have it, you have it, all of us do. And particularly in the investment community where their decisions are made quickly and you are working in environments where there aren't a lot of women, pay attention. And, you know, I have a tendency sometimes to be like, I'm not cutting my hair, I'm going to wear earrings, whatever. And that's fine, but you have to really sort of own your responsibility for showing up in a way that is going to work. Even though that might not be exactly what you want to do. I also recommend videotaping yourself over and over and over and over while you practice your pitch, because you'll catch a lot of stuff that'll make you stronger.
So, you know, I would add, again, back to the other side again. I've been both sides, actually. But just to really follow on from what you're saying, my advice is very similar. Don't go in Kohls. So it's just like when you're bringing a product to market, you test it, right? And you iterate and you refine. I don't think it's that difficult to find people, and it can be men or women really, who will sit down with you over a cup of coffee and go through your pitch or give you advice and really come with some, make sure you know your stuff. I know that sounds obvious, but again, it comes down to preparation. You know, we give people the opportunity because they've been introduced or whatever to give us a pitch, and they're not really as prepared as they could be. So really find someone and test before you come in. I think all the things you said about, you know, really thinking through, you know, the firms you're going to approach. Too often I've seen people manage to get appointments, you know, opportunities to come in and meet with VCs because they have an idea, an interesting idea, they've got an introduction, but they blow it. They probably see 10 people in a week, but you're off with your pitch. You know, you get feedback, and if you do that, there's no time to really change. So the first couple of VCs, make sure they're not the top of your list, you know. Right? Try them out first and get the feedback and use the feedback. You know, I think raising money is really hard, but think about it as really a learning process and really be open to the feedback. As founders, CEOs, executives, you won't take all of that feedback, otherwise you probably wouldn't progress. But think about it. Be open to feedback. Be open in the meeting. But really test first. Find someone who will spend time with you to listen to what you have to say, refine, iterate, go back. That would be my key advice. And it comes down to the network again. I mean, it's so easy now. You're really only a couple of steps away from someone who can help you.
Here's where I get to be the heretic and the jerk in the room. So my advice has changed over the years. Harvard, for the past 10 years that I've been watching, continues to publish a stunning result. That all other things being equal, no earrings, best business plan, best presentation, a male entrepreneur is 64% more likely to secure funding than a female entrepreneur. So none of the advice that you just heard can change the fact that you are female. So then what do? Do you not raise capital? Well, that's ridiculous. And I don't think that that's really what you wanted to hear was your option. I actually think that part of acknowledging that that's the reality gets us working on the things that really need fixing. So what needs fixing in Silicon Valley as it relates to venture? The ecosystem is a single gender ecosystem. It works really well for men. And not because men don't want women there. I actually think most men do want us there. But it has become so heavily male that it is very difficult to be a female truly a female, within a room of classic Silicon Valley people, even when there are a few of us there who happen to be female. So we need to be fixing the ecosystem. That means that we actually need to bring people along. If you're a man, you need to bring women. If you're a woman, you need to bring men. I really think the model of gender-only networks is broken and is part of the problem, and specifically women's networks are really holding us back. So we need to be out there building bridges, both genders, because that's the only thing that results in funding for women, is when men and women sit at the table together, we see capital flow. When single gender is present, capital flows to men. And this is true, by the way, at all points of fundraising, angel, venture, private equity, all the way to IPO, which is really an interesting conversation. So the other piece that I would want to make sure people are thinking about is that the fixing women has also held women back. We continue to guide, coach, and mentor women. And I would encourage each and every one of you women in the room to stop being mentored. You have been mentored to death. And men are phenomenal mentors. They have great advice and they have a lot of talking to do. And I would encourage you to thank them kindly and ask them to sit at your side as an advisor. And an advisor or sponsor, whatever word other than mentor, to open doors, make introductions, and write the frickin' check.
The same size check.
There we go.
So Sharon,
I modified the.
Yeah, can I just say a few things there? Because I don't think any of us here have said just talk to women about getting introductions. I mean, I don't think that we said gender only, and I agree with that. I think that, you know, you've got a couple of guys here, and I do think I do believe in this daughter thing actually. But I when I'm saying get advice, I'm not suggesting you just go to a woman, you know, it could be a guy, you know, whatever. But I don't think you can wait for everything to change. I think you've got to push forward. And here's what I think. There are VCs and there are VCs. There are some VCs who, you know, are less inclined, but there's what I would call sort of off-Broadway VCs that might be your first port of call that are more inclined to think diversity. So I am with you that it really is men and women together changing this. As a VC, I'm optimistic, so I'm a little more optimistic than Sharon because I think you're going to change things. But
I was optimistic, just not about fixing women being optimistic. No, and by the way, you're right, you didn't say anything about women only, but right. Broadly out there, they're being told women only. I do think, and I'd like to have your comment about this, Janice, is alternative sources of capital have been very effective for women. We were talking earlier about LPs who are family offices. Family offices are doing more and more direct investing. Do you see alternatives for women?
I do. So what I'm seeing, and I'm seeing certainly women who have worked with men or with, and it's probably mostly men, in organizations as they've been, you know, sizable organizations. Because if you think about the whole angel community, so I'm seeing women get funded from angels who are men, which is great. So you've got to start to get your company going, get progress. I think the next round is hard for anyone, men or women, or all points in between. You know, it's just going from a seed angel-funded round to an A is hard, and it takes a lot of work. Don't give up. But I think you're absolutely right. If you look at family offices, there's lots of women there, and they're coming in, and they are investing, and they're investing alongside funds as well. So I think the point is that be creative, you know,
and persistent.
Exactly. So Bill's got one more question for the panel, and then he and I are actually going to step off, and we're going to hand the mics to you guys. So think of, you know, questions that you want to ask our panelists, and they've agreed to stick around as long as good questions are here, and we're gonna leave them up here to do that. So get your questions ready. We're going to take a couple of these mics, and we can pass them around to you guys. So Bill. One more before we exit stage left.
Yes, I think anyone can chime in. Jen, I'll throw it to you to start. We've talked a little bit about this, but I think it's the question, where do men fit into this conversation?
Well, I mean, from my point of view, men are vital because they're pretty much who I work with. So it's sort of funny when you said, don't just go to a woman. I'm like, who would that be? I have to say I have been really, really fortunate to work for and with some men who are actively seeking to elevate women. And they're critical for a number of reasons. I think, and I'm just going to have a moment of total honesty here. Like, as a woman, I am sometimes harder on my women employees than on my men, right? I expect more. I expect them to be on time. I expect them to be accurate. I expect them not to make mistakes. And generally that's true. And so I think that there's a way in which men not only play a vital role because they occupy a lot of the seats, but also because there's a balancing function. And the reason that groups work well, I don't actually know exactly what the reasons are. I don't think any of us do. But the reason that groups work well when they're diverse is because we balance each other and we have various approaches and viewpoints and ways of working through a problem that help get to the best solution. I think men, okay, so I'm gonna diverge a little bit here and say that we're in a situation right now that I think for a lot of women, especially women, any woman who has gone up against a man for a promotion or a job or the presidency and sort of been shot down while being potentially more qualified and capable, smarter. It's a difficult moment. It is difficult. It is difficult to look at that on a large scale and not take it personally and not sort of be like, oh God, I'm so tired of all this. So I think that men need to stand up almost more than women do, and fight and elevate and identify and cheer on. I mean, I look across an organization where I work right now. It's almost all men. And there are 2 other women there. That's funny. And the degree to which women in many circumstances are holding a majority of the burden very gracefully, and, when approached for promotion will be like, oh gosh, well, I don't know, are you sure? You sure? I think I can do that? And it's like, no, well, you're already doing it. And 10 times, the work that would be normally expected of someone in this role. So I think that it takes a particular type of man and a particular type of approach as a man to say like, yeah, of course you're going to say to me, no, don't promote me. That one, I don't know. I don't really need any more spotlight. And say like, yes, you do. I want to shine the light on you. I want to shine a light on you because I see what you're doing and I see how good you are and I see how hard you work, and I don't need you to bluster at me and tell me. So I think it's vital, and I really, really appreciate many of the men in my life and many of my male mentors, and coworkers and collaborators. And guys, you gotta stand up. You really do, all of you, now.
Yeah, very, very helpful. Well, I think. With that, Brian and I will step aside and let our panelists take the questions from the audience. So we'll take hands and we'll try to run mics.
Yeah, just raise your hand if you have a question. Official runner, great.
Official runners.
You can have 2 mics. Raise your hand if you have a question.
Hello? Hi, I'm Charu. It's nice to meet you, Sharon, in person. I care about this so much that I made a documentary film on female founders. That's how I know Sharon about that. But my question is, so now I'm running a startup company, and oftentimes I get all kinds of feedback, and extremely opposing and contradictory feedback, right? So it's a quandary, and so my question to you is, or rather, a little more prefacing. So it's often very natural to assume that somebody is not giving you money because you're a woman as well, right? That sometimes happens too. So my question is, what have you seen women pitching to you do that you wish they didn't do? So what could we do better when pitching?
So I think my advice of know who you're pitching to is so critically important. I am an enterprise B2B investor at the core, as I'm investing on behalf of a large enterprise SaaS company. If you listen to our pitch very closely, or if you look at our portfolio, you have a pretty good sense that we are investing in and around our product ecosystem. I have people come to me that, will pitch solutions that are just not relevant at all. And so I can't emphasize enough how important it is to know who you're going to talk to. Are you talking to the consumer investor within the fund? Are you talking to the enterprise investor in the fund? Look at the portfolios of the investors that you're going to speak with. Look at those companies and really try to understand what's the specialty of this person that I'm going to talk to. I have less comments on the tone of voice and bouncing, as I've seen that less. But what I have seen is that, and this is where I think the networking and getting feedback from your peers is important as well. Mostly, I think the important feedback is to get, the most important feedback to get is from peers who are also venture fundraising, right? Your mom's feedback or your dad's feedback is probably not as relevant as, peers who are also trying to raise capital and going before investors and know, sort of what the key points you should be sort of hitting on are. You do have to be really prepared, I think, whether you're a woman or a man, quite frankly. I've seen the same mistakes happen on both sides of not knowing who you're talking to, not being able to sort of tell a, coherent story that, for my perspective, needs to be metrics driven. So I would say you need to know sort of what your pitch needs to be like if you're investing, if you're an enterprise company, if you're a consumer company, sort of what the key metrics are that those investors will care about. And I've seen traditionally that the women that have come before me have been light on the metrics. Maybe the story's there and the background's there, but potentially light on the metrics.
I've seen so many pitches, men, women, and men and women, but sometimes together, sometimes apart. And I think much of the advice is the same for all. You will get lots of feedback, as I said before. And I think listen to the feedback, and some you will take and some you will not. And different firms are looking for different things. So again, it reinforces what you're saying. And I think a great thing that you said is, I said about testing, but yes, talk to someone who's just raised money, and really listen to their feedback. And they will tell you some of the things I said. Don't just go to 10 people at once. Test, get feedback, and adapt. I think you have to be yourself, and I think you have to be very well prepared. I don't think, I think it's very hard in the long run to be anything other than who you are. I would say it's really interesting. Hillary Clinton, right? Here we go. So, and I have to be honest, I'm not the biggest fan. I find her as irritating as any man, or most men. There's probably one that she's not as irritating as. But, she did say something yesterday. I was listening to her conversation at Recode with Kara Swisher and Walt. And she said, and she was asked a question about women and, really encouraging women and that type of thing. And what she said was this, that when she has offered a position to a man, they say, yay, hey, great, I want this promotion, I'm starting tomorrow. She asks a woman, and the woman will say, really? Do you think I'm ready for this? Do you think I'm up for this? Really? Me? Wow. And I think you've got to think about that. This confidence needs to come through, but don't try to change who you are. But when you're giving the pitch, you need to have that confidence. And you need to have confidence, competence, and passion. Competence really shows through in the presentation. Be prepared. But really, you need to show this competence. Don't doubt, and don't be overly friendly. I say that to British people who tend to be really friendly too. No jokes, no humor. That doesn't work too well. But just come in and show your stuff.
I don't have any advice for entrepreneurs. I have an advice for investors because I have a key learning. We just closed investment number 69 yesterday. We're averaging about 2 a month, so I think I have some good learning points that are really interesting to me. We continue, and we're a group that focuses on investing in women. We continue after the entrepreneur to ask a question after the entrepreneur leaves the room that I think needs to be removed from investors' questions. An entrepreneur will present to us, it's a phenomenal business, there's revenue, there's all sorts of validation in the market, and there's all sorts of proof points that we should be able to see make it a compelling investment opportunity. And we'll say, why do we think no one else has invested in that company? And when you ask that question broadly, that's not a problem. When you ask it about women and minorities, the odds start to stack up. So it's less that you need to care that women don't get funding. You as an entrepreneur, go out there, raise your capital, and funders be damned. Go forward. But we as investors need to really think about the questions we ask and the assumptions that exist in our world. We think that all of the best deals are going to have a lot of interest around them. Interestingly, our exit that just happened is in a medical device company. Our exit was in just under 2 years, and the exit multiples are really, really nice, and we're really pleased. But it was an entrepreneur, young woman, with an incredible pedigree, but she looks probably about 10 years younger than she is, and really struggled to raise capital from what I'll call the classic venture firms. And we funded at a level that allowed her to drive this company all the way to exit. And we had to overlook that question because the question was asked, why is no one else funding her? We had to listen to our best medical device investor experts, and we had to listen to the validators in the room and put aside that others had passed on it. And I share that because I know there are some investors in the room, and there are some questions that we end up asking ourselves that continue to validate the pattern recognition and continue to validate the problems. You as an entrepreneur, ignore it. Go forward, be fierce, and raise your capital.
Come back to the metrics point, because the more that you can validate that there is product market fit with data, a lot of those questions start to fall away, right? And so you guys were relying upon experts. We rely on our product teams to assess the underlying technology and the core products. We're looking at, sort of revenue metrics, usage metrics, right? For our companies as well. The more that you can have objective data that shows, that your product is valuable, you're in a large growing market. I think that's where you can start to see some of those questions, disappear and you can overcome them.
One thing that I think is really helpful today with venture, and I don't know if you see this because you really are a customer, is, you have all the data. If you can actually test, obviously, the pitch, we've talked about this many times. If you have an idea, really show some, and this is not just about women, this is generally, I find the pitches go most well, that's the right way to say it, when you've got some experience with customers. So test your idea with customers, potential customers, if it's consumers. Get some feedback and be able to show that. In addition to, I think most VCs will have a good sense of market size and all those types of things. But, as part of this whole data gathering, really get early feedback from customers. And I think that's really increasingly important to VCs. I know it sounds obvious, but really do some testing. Show that you know what you're doing.
Okay. If you've ever seen a house decorated by a man, or, if you gave a man $1 million and said, decorate this house the way that you want it, and then you gave it to a woman, you're going to be living in a very different house. And, I want chandeliers in every bathroom. When we're looking at tech in the future, right now we're looking at it from a man's perspective. And, I want to be living in a future designed by women. And we are so far from that I feel like even in these conversations, we're coming at it from and is that armchair, comfortable? Well, don't come in with earrings. It's don't come in with those little cute glass cups. It's well, we do want those, And so I'm just wondering, at what point can the female population do to really shift this momentum to where we don't have to sit around having conversations about what jewelry to wear and to bounce or not to bounce, but where we're saying, do these ideas serve the world? Do we have enough tech in reproduction? Do we have enough tech in, is every Planned Parenthood being funded? Is every woman safe? Are we working on infectious diseases? I don't care about virtual reality. Guess what? Men are putting billions of dollars to make virtual women to have sex with. I don't want that. I don't think most women want that. So I don't want to sit around and figure out how to make a pitch to go to a VR investor for some virtual world that I don't even want to live in. I need birth control. I need my kids to be safe. I want to learn. I want to have rights. And I want every other woman in the world to be empowered. So I'm just wondering, how can we think outside the box to like really swing the momentum? Because like everyone here in this room has less than 100 years to live, probably. So like what can we do that's like drastic to like get that house like bulldozed and like get a new house? Get out there.
I actually want to take that on because I love that question, and that's what I ask all day long. So I've been at Astia now since 2003, and I kept expecting the ecosystem to change. And you're right, it hasn't. And I now ask, well, then what does it take to change it? And that's the work that I think needs to happen. And it's why I don't spend any time, Charu, answering the question, what can women do differently? I don't care. I really do care about getting innovation to the world and keep asking that question in every conference like this.
I mean, I think you're talking about actually huge markets too in your, so I'm actually quite serious. Like, get out there and do it. Don't start another VR company. We don't need one. Plenty.
Yeah, I think we're all looking at interesting businesses, and I really like what you say because I believe in that. And as I've got older, actually, I've never really adapted. I have to say, I understand what you're saying, but I've always vowed that I would never sell my soul to be successful, and that means, being a woman. And, I have got some feedback on. I remember actually one particular entrepreneur that I didn't fund his company, I passed, and he wrote a piece on the internet about my shoes, and it's like. He said, she didn't like my deal, and she was very friendly. And then he got into my shoes and my expensive shoes. And it was like, what is that all about? And I was quite sensitive about this for a while. And then I saw the humor, and it's like, ridiculous, come on. But I think, I call people out on it now, and I feel now I was always loath to do some of this type of thing for women, actually. But now it's got to a point, it's like, come on, and I have a daughter, and she... And her friends, they're raring to go just like you. So I would encourage it. And I would just, when you have these business ideas, just make sure that they're great business ideas. And they do all the things Americans talked about. They still need to be good ideas. But I think we have to, I don't think it's about waiting for a woman president, I have to say. I think that, although I have to say in the UK we have a female prime minister, we had one before her. And if you look at the parliament, there's tons of people. We have, I do... One thing I would have to, I just want to say this, because I've just come from a meeting today. I'm on the board of Zynga, which is a gaming company here in the city. And it was started by a guy called Mark Pincus, who is known to be challenging in many ways. And he now has daughters, and we're a public company. We have 4 women on our board, which is 50% of the directors. I think that's pretty cool. And there's a Women at Zynga organization really trying to help. They don't use the word mentor really, but encourage and do all these things. So it's another, and I felt good today because I was coming here, because I think this is great, things are changing. So I just wanted to shout out about that, because I'm sort of thinking, this is really good, and you're thinking, of course there should be half the board women, but in many companies there are no women. So I am seeing some change. But back to here, I do see there's a little more openness, there's a ways to go. But if you've got a great business, really go for it. But, don't come with ideas. You need to come out with a thoughtful plan.
100% agree. Listen, I think the only way in which we're going to change is to go kick ass and build incredibly successful companies, or, sort of drive really hard in your career to get to that level where you have the ability to influence the direction of the organization, of the fund that you're investing on behalf of, so that you can change that vision. You can invest in female entrepreneurs, and you can change that landscape. I think we all want it today. I 100% hear you. Your vision sounds awesome. I think the thing that each of us in this room can do is really, excuse my language, but go kick ass, right? And that success and watching women sort of continue to build incredibly successful, $1 billion+ businesses, will, then you start to develop your own pattern, right? So, And that's the point that I think we need to get to, and we need to sort of continue to drive as women to be investors. Don't be afraid, right? I'm part of an industry where I'm talking single-digit percentages in terms of the makeup of the community that's female. That didn't deter me. I just kept going, right? And I would sort of encourage the same for all of you in the crowd. Don't let the numbers scare you. Keep driving. And the only way that we're going to be able to change it is to get into positions of power like this, where you have the ability to influence the way that the sort of machine works.
Yeah, and I would say don't let the numbers inspire you, right? And take it on, and know that you're living in a time when you can do that, and that it is changing, and in some ways changing very quickly, and in some ways very slowly.
Sharon, actually, something that's happened to me that you just said is an investor actually asked me why my fundraising round wasn't closed during a pitch meeting, which was very odd. But actually, one of the reasons that our fundraising round is closed is, people have really tried to kind of bully us on terms, and we've had to walk from a bunch of deals. So I was wondering if you have any advice for how to approach those types of conversations so that you don't have to walk on deals that might actually work for you, but where the terms are really not something that you can agree to.
Well, I think we can perhaps both comment, actually. So, I think it's interesting, and it much depends on the stage you're at. And, I think that VCs come at things a little differently. And depending the stage of your business, I think today many VCs, if you have traction, they're less valuation sensitive and, really sort of thinking through the risk reward. I think it's worthwhile sitting down and, talking to more than one VC and having dialogue. And I don't know anything about your business and your terms. But sometimes, honestly, companies or teams, startups can have what might be unrealistic sort of terms. And so I think that what you need to think through is sit down with the VC and talk about, this is where we are today. How do we build value over time? Because what really matters to you is the valuation a little further along, or the terms a little further along. That being said, I think it's very much the case that you should not give up too much. So it really is a dialogue, but make sure you're talking to firms and partners who will have that dialogue with you. And also make sure you have good legal counsel, because they'll help you and they'll tell you what the norm is. Because you could be arguing for a point that's not the norm today. It might have been, a couple of years ago, but is not the norm today. Because, one thing you'll find is VCs often move in mass. They're not necessarily so original. They'll look to see. So I would get all of the information that you can and sit down and have a dialogue, think about it and go back. But have very balanced conversations and really sort of think about, but don't just look at the terms today. Look at where this will take you the next round of funding or a little bit further out. And, talk to a few more VCs and then come back with a rational argument. You may have to compromise, but really think through. If you do this, I could do this, and just really make sure you have the information.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That I think if you're fundraising and you're out of market, hire good counsel, spend money on it. It is the one thing you will not regret. As an investor, it's actually painful to work with companies that have bad counsel. And we've walked away from deals before where companies have just stuck to points that were like, this is non-standard. We can't get comfortable with it. So I do agree with that point very strongly. I think you can't get tied up, and my advice is, again, to both genders in this case, you can't get tied to a specific value, right? At one point I had a guy come into me that was like, well, every seed stage company out there is raising 2 on a $10 million cap note. It's like, no, they're not, right? Like, maybe that's the YC companies or, and so there's also like urban legends out there within venture that, like, oh, yeah, I should be able to get X, Y, and Z, right, in terms of my valuation. I think you need to really balance what does the capital that's being offered give you today, right? In a certain case, it's acceleration of time to market. You may have an advantage then over competitors in the space. So I think it depends what terms, right? Is it valuation? Is it? Oh, okay. That's not non-standard.
Yeah, that's pretty standard.
Yeah, that's pretty standard. Yeah. So and we don't do a lot of seed, but we see a lot of seed investors have board seats in seed rounds. Sorry.
Well, I would say some don't, but at the end of the day, this is a relationship, right? It's not a negotiation for a board seat. Really, this is a conversation. And so I find our most enjoyable investments, if that's allowed to be said, are those that recognize it's a relationship first and foremost. Venture has always said it's a marriage. The term sheet is the starting point of that marriage. And I would encourage you to think about it as an articulation of the relationship. What are you trying to say? And if you look at it as what are you trying to say and what are you hearing back, you'll get less stuck on the absolutes. And instead you'll find, can we really make this work? Great example that you talk about board seats. There's always a way to make something like that work. What are they trying to achieve through the board seat? Is it information? Is it access to you? Is it access, a guarantee to be able to help you, find out what is the underlying and then find the answer that works for all of you. Don't get wed to no board seats. The hard and fast rules are not, and they change. You've been in this long enough to see all of this has changed 20 times since I've been watching. And where I think entrepreneurs and investors get it right is when they're not wed to a model, where they actually sit down and talk about what is right for your business and what is right for my investment thesis. And where do we meet? And then how do we achieve that together?
Yeah, I think you need to think, why do I not want this board seat? Is it because I don't like this particular person, or is it because, you just want to manage a business yourself for a while? Usually, and again, I'm an optimist, VCs that invest in seeds, they've got so many things they can invest in. And not everybody takes a board seat on a seed. If they do, it's usually because they feel they can add value and they're interested. Otherwise, if you think about hours in a day, it's perhaps not worth their time. Often people invest in seeds and they have information, but they're not on a board because it's not the best use of their time. So if they want to be on your board, find out why. Is it because they feel they can really help you get to that next stage? And be open-minded about it. And if it's really that person, you have to think again about the relationship. But having someone on your board might help you get to the Series A. So it might not be all bad, because if they're engaged with you and committed to you, they're more likely to help you get that next round, which, quite frankly, is probably the hardest round you're ever going to raise.
And statistics. Let's go back to the numbers. There are $0 billion companies that didn't have boards. There are $0 billion companies that didn't have co-founders, so I'll use single founders, get a co-founder. But boards at the end of the day are there to help you. Think of it as the helping piece and then find the right solution for you.
The makeup of your board may also change too as the company matures, right? So yeah, you may start with a seed investor on your board, and by the time you get to your Series C, the board looks completely different. As much as venture is a marriage and you're in it for the long haul, this point in particular, you may only be living with this person on the board, and you shouldn't view it as living with, right? You should feel that there's value coming out of this relationship, but they may only be on the board for another round or two.
I'd be remiss to not mention that if you are seeking legal counsel, Shepard Mullen is in the room if you guys want to just chat. But we do have time for one last question. I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. I believe it's over here.
Hi, I'm going to speak up a little bit, so to up the energy. I know it's getting late. First of all, wanted to take a moment to thank Sway Ventures about the fact that we're here and we gathered to talk about this issue. I think that in itself is already an indicator of shift and change. So just want to recognize that. Also, wanted to be transparent about just a couple comments around the use of word female versus woman. And I would encourage to switch to the use of word women because it's more inclusive in terms of gender identity, whereas female is more indicative of the biological characteristics. So just, yeah. And so my question is actually around allyship. How do we, I know many of you already alluded to it in terms of how do we create a cultural shift? I appreciated what Sharon said about the real commitment that companies should make around the percentages, right? And saying we are committed to 50-50 and that's it, right? Or what, some of you have shared about, ways to encourage women's participation. And also what I think Janice said about, we as women coming into the room being appreciated for our skills set as opposed to, oh, here's a woman here and being tokenized for it. But my question is around how do we, often we're pressured to, we're burdened by representation. We're burdened by being better than men. We're burdened by speaking up. We're burdened by aligning ourselves with the sort of more patriarchal versions of what it means to be a business person. And I wanted to know more about your experiences around what it means to get your male counterparts, to get them on board in the true sense of being an ally, sort of having your back and walking alongside as opposed to perhaps co-opting the process or just for visibility's sake or for credibility's sake. And I'm really curious about your personal experiences around, those allies that you're working with who you felt that were really holding you back.
Yeah, so, I've had varied experiences working with people, humans of both genders. There are a couple of men who I'll address it because you asked about men in particular, and also they generally surround me at work, so that's who I work with. I think there's something about, and this is probably true just in human relationships in general, but when someone really appreciates you and sees you for who you are and what you're good at and appreciates that about you, I think they're in a very good position to be an ally, whether they're a man or a woman. And so for me, there are two men who instantly come to mind who have been great allies and mentors and confidants. One was an investor and board member, in fact, who when I was a CEO, I was deeply, deeply appreciative of and really, really happy to know. And I think it had very little to do with my being a woman, but I think because for both of them, they appreciated something about me so much, they kind of almost wanted to fight harder for me because I was a woman. So those relationships tend to be, at least for me, they tend to have evolved out of situations where I was really comfortable being myself and where I felt like I didn't have to necessarily pretend, or I was in a flow with my work and what I was doing, and I felt comfortable and confident and could really be seen for what I was good at. Because I do think it's true that when you go in with all of this sort of notion of like, I have to do this or I have to do that, or I always say or I need to, deflect the ends of my sentences. And sometimes I do think that those are true, those are helpful things to know about yourself and to work on, that when you drop all that, you actually come across much more authentically, and that's when people can really, really see you. So I think there's a lot to be said about confidence and knowing what you're good at and being really comfortable with that. We second guess so much, all of us. I was talking to a woman the other night who's a chief product officer. She's an amazing long-term product professional, like one of the best people in the industry. And we were talking about something with her CEO or whatever. And she was like, God, I don't know when I'm going to get over my imposter syndrome. And she's 50. And I was so glad that she said that, because I'm like, oh, sometimes I feel like I'm the only one. Like, I've been doing this forever, and I still feel like I don't have my slides all right. Like, I don't know. But when you find people with whom you can really, really be yourself, let yourself be yourself and let them see you, and then let them help you, and then ask for help. People will help you. I think that sometimes we feel like we have to do it all on our own, especially as women. It can be isolating in technology or male-dominated industries in general. And there are a lot of people out there who want to help, and they're curious. They want to know how to help. I have someone who advises my company now who came to me actually in a job interview, my first interview. He's not an employee, and he said to me, I'm speaking tonight at a thing at Stanford about how we get more women in the industry. What do you think? And that just was such a nice opening, because now I actually really feel like I can go to him and say, like, I think this, or I'm seeing this, am I making it up? And I can be myself, and he'll advocate for me. So let yourself be known.
Can I just add to this? I was thinking back as you were talking about people who've been most important to me, and men and women actually. And it's not necessarily people that are more senior than me or who I've worked for. It's the teams I've worked with. So it can be a board, public, or a venture company that I'm part of the board with, working with other VCs or the team of that company. Or indeed, as I've been in operating roles, the teams that have worked with me or for me. And, many of those people go off and do other things. So by creating that really great sort of give and take as part of a team, I find that those people will be there for you and help you. I mean, Najib is here. Where's Najib? Is he here? Has he disappeared? Who works for Salesforce Ventures. He worked for me years ago. And, we keep coming back, things. But, these people that have worked for me, and Brian, actually, we knew each other from way back. Najib, I was just talking about you. I was just saying that the men and the women, but we're talking about, men, you're a man, but have been important to me and helped me are often the people who work for me or with me. It's not just the people who I've worked for. So, if you working in great teams, I really believe in that, because, you are yourself, you bring out each other's strengths, you can be open, and you can really help each other.
So I have a really interesting lesson learned from working equally with men and women, and that is that I had to learn to get comfortable with uncomfortable. I think a lot of us are striving for comfort, and we want to be included in, we want to be part of, and that we think of intellectually as feeling comfortable. And what I'm finding about working with men as peers, because I think that was a really strong point, working with men and women as peers, it gets very uncomfortable very quickly. And if you can be authentic self in that moment, and everyone can participate as authentic self, that's when you start to see the change that the woman around the beam, who I can't see, that's when you start seeing that change. At Astia, I'm done waiting for change. We've been effecting change. And our call to action is clear. If you're looking for investment, Sharon at Astia.org. We look at 50 deals every Monday. They all have a woman somewhere on the founding team, and great men as well. But what we've learned about doing that work is that we've had to get very comfortable with being uncomfortable, because equal proportions of men and women in the room mean that the women are uncomfortable because there are so many women. We're not used to that. It's mostly men that we work with. And equally, the men are uncomfortable because there are so many women present, and they're not used to that either. We're going to stumble. We're going to offend each other. We're going to say stupid shit, and we get over it, and we move on. And it happens every time I have a board meeting. I'm struck by the fact that I have a male chair of my board, and a number of the trustees are equally represented as men and women. Somewhere during the course of our quarterly board meeting, someone will get offended, and it'll be nothing to do with the topic. It'll be how it was expressed, and who it was expressed by, and what power was perceived, and who was perceiving it, and how it was being received. And once we can get over that stuff and just get comfortable with being uncomfortable and talk to each other as our authentic self, the awesome thing is it works. It works really well, and we're seeing the results certainly where I work, and Cindy Padnas sees us at Illuminate. There are models, and you can achieve them. but they do require getting out of our comfort zones and daring to stay in the moment when it is uncomfortable.
I'm guessing. I'm second guessing myself if I should add anything to that after such a strong end. But I think the thing I will say is, throughout my career, men have been incredibly helpful in terms of really bringing me up within organizations, providing me with opportunities, giving me a platform to speak and articulate my ideas. At each point that I got one of those opportunities, I took it as well, which I think is also pretty critically important. But building relationships with my male colleagues was very different, and my male superiors was very different than the way that my peers did it, right? Who were trading, like I just found out maybe 5 minutes before I came up here that tonight is the first game of the NBA Finals, right? That's not something that I know, and I don't walk into the office talking about football scores or basketball games or hockey, or I'm just trying to name every sport I know right now. But, the point being that the way in which I gained credibility with my male colleagues was mostly by doing pretty great work. And that really broke the ice, and the conversation ended up becoming about work, and then you creep in your personal life a little bit, and you slowly over time it was more of a process, quite frankly, with a lot of my my mentors that even though that's a bad word, but with starting by doing great work and building that relationship and gaining credibility with them, as a solid contributor, and then building the personal relationship. It came slower than it did for some of my male colleagues I saw, right, who were bonding over going out to drinks and watching games together and sort of sharing scores. But over time you can sort of start to surface those people that you feel really comfortable sort of being your authentic self with, which they're the ones that will help carry you along the way.
Sorry, I just want to add one more thing. This is related to what Janice said earlier. Is someone said to me once when I was in my 20s, which is a really long time ago, she was working for me, and I was a little bit insecure because I felt like she was more senior than I was, and I had managed to hire her, and I was kind of like, oh no. And she looked at me and she said, oh, we'll all work for each other. You'll work for me someday. I'll work for you someday. And that's really true. These relationships are long. Often, these professional relationships, the most meaningful ones and the ones that are the most impactful. And you just never know what kind of future work or future relationship is going to play out. And I think it's really easy sometimes, especially for some of us, not for everybody, but to kind of think of mentors or superiors or whomever, someone we admire, whether it's a peer or a teammate or a boss or whatever, as this person to whom we must always look up. But even in the moment, they probably value your perspective just as much as you value theirs. And so to think about these relationships as very long-term and reciprocal, and remember that reciprocity is I think some of the most powerful, that's where really a lot of the power in them comes. So don't underestimate yourself.
I didn't want to be last. No. I don't want to be. I don't want to be last. I didn't want to be last. So I'm done.
You go. No, I'll go last. Go on.
I think one of the things that's most important as well is listen. We need to help each other, right? As we build relationships with men, bring other women into those relationships with you, right? And I think that's important in terms of not only how do we think about building relationships, but how can you also start to build relationships with other men within an organization, right? I've certainly leaned on senior women within Salesforce who've helped sort of bridge those connections, and I gain credibility because of an association with them, right? And it sort of helps jumpstart that relationship. So I would say we all also have, a responsibility to help each other as well, in terms of, really sort of knocking down some of those barriers to building relationships with men.
Yeah, and I would just say, I sort of feeling a little guilty, actually, particularly after your comments over there, because I'm feeling I'm not doing enough and should do more, and so on. And certainly, you've made me feel really bad when I get up here. But one thing I will say is this, that we are here because, we think it's really important. And, it's not just because we want to see women for the sake of it, but we do believe in the business benefits. I mean, I think we're all doing different things here, from VC, public boards, private boards, hugely influential organizations and so on. But we're also here because we are business-minded, and, Sharon did her little commercial there, and I think all of us here, I mean, I'm sure you're going to be recruiting women as well as men, but, I would love to see and hear from you with any businesses that you have, and, I think that we would all be open to that. So please, we're here to really be available to you, and there's nothing I'd like better to find a couple of business opportunities and really see you be successful. So, go for it. One question I have to say this because I think it's really interesting. If you think about women in other fields, medical, there's lots of very successful women, but I was thinking about this today because many of the women in entertainment, and I'm not really necessarily talking about the Kardashians, but, you look at Beyonce or Gwyneth Paltrow or whatever, obviously Oprah, they're really becoming quite entrepreneurial and building businesses and, really interesting businesses. And then I started to think about some of the more powerful women in entertainment, and they're really accepted and respected. And I think tech is a little bit harder because it's tech. But I do think that it comes back to what I'm saying. If you can be really good at something, then I think you can really forge ahead and be really successful.
Before we close tonight, I do want to say thank you again. I so appreciate all of the words of wisdom that you shared. I appreciate the fact that, this is not a period. This is more so just a comma. So we are looking forward to continuing the conversation. I will be following this event with contact information for the speakers tonight. I do encourage you. These women are fantastic allies to have. Reach out, be confident, get uncomfortable, and just have those conversations. Don't only have these conversations with women, but have these conversations with colleagues, have these conversations with advisors. Just make and expand your network. So thank you once again. If we could give them a warm round of applause. We thank you again for coming out tonight. We do host these events on a monthly basis, tackling various topics that are relevant to startups. Our next one is called The Future of Attraction. It's on July 11th, and it's all about building a talent pipeline. So I know some of you are recruiting, some of you are looking for new jobs. This will be a fantastic panel that we'll have again July 11th. So thank you again.